I think. Okay, so speaking of that, we really have been on this show, especially recently. There hasn't been so much need to dunk on all these BTC guys to the extent that I have been doing it. It's been just one kind of slide, sort of at the end of the show, or something like one topic. It hasn't been a big focus of what we've been talking about for a long time because it's just so irrelevant. But the last couple of weeks, we've really started to see the whole lie and scam of BTC really start to fall apart in the minds of the BTC people, and without much prompting, I'd say from me. I've been busy coding Selene, or anybody else in the BCH community. Of course, people are always talking on Twitter and so forth, but for the most part, everybody's been busy at Bliss. We've been doing our own thing, but reality is starting to create its own problems for them. So we're seeing live in action how a kind of information bubble pops and reality just sets in on a group of people that have been quite deluded about their situation for a long time. And then they sort of suddenly realize, are we the bad guys? Or they realize, wait, we've been wrong this whole time. Or they start having realizations like, oh, guys, I just figured out X, Y, and Z. And everyone's like, no shit, Sherlock. We told you that for 5 years and you told us we were wrong. But now you're here for your comeuppance. So the reason I was talking about the US elections earlier before is perfectly timed. We've just had in the last couple of days the US presidential debate, which was moved forward between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. It's about 90 minutes and it's available on YouTube. It was run by CNN and there was a lot of accusations about would it be fair and blah, 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 blah. But they actually did a pretty good job to be fair to CNN. And Joe Biden just basically failed so hard. He was just unable to keep strings of thought together. He sort of looked feeble and super old and just generally looked like he was not really capable of running the country now at his current age of, I think, 82, let alone for the next 4 years on top of that. Now, this has not been news to anybody who's been paying attention to US politics at all. This has been very obvious and well known around the world, but the Democratic Party in America have done a fairly good job of propagandizing their own constituents to the extent that no, it's all fine. He's actually good. And, being in bed with the media and stuff to try and cover it up or run cover fire and excuses for his declining mental state and I guess to some extent his physical state as well too. So we have a clip here from David Sachs, who is a sort of VC rich investor type guy on the All In podcast. If you want to find out more about all this US politics, if you're not in the loop with all that, I do recommend this All In podcast and also Scott Adams. If you look up some of his daily streams, Coffee with Scott Adams, you can get into all of this. But he is here with a quick explanation of what has happened.
So the Twitter
Democratic, the Twitter clip there. I've also got a link to the YouTube, which is the full thing for people who want to look into that. And so let's have a quick listen to that. But before we do, the point that I'm going to make about this entire thing is that this is literally the exact same thing that is happening with the BTC maximalists and Blockstream, who are a front for the bankers. They essentially are the ones controlling things behind the scene. And then Bitcoin Core is their kind of front, that there's a few power players in that are a bit more publicly visible. And then they run these kind of cons about the Lightning Network and about we need small blocks or decentralization will die and all that stuff, with the cooperation of the media, which in the Bitcoin case is Bitcoin. It was Twitter before, Jack Dorsey got kicked out and he was busy censoring, Bitcoin Cash never had its own topic, and the block size was booked and all these scams, which has now started to come undone with the publishing of Hijacking Bitcoin and all that. And then you have the rank and file who are sort of the podcasters who then broadcast that set of lies and bullshit, out to the average BTC hodler who is in this state of disillusioned reality about everything, or delusional, I guess, reality about everything, and they have zero idea of what's actually happening in reality. So this is a well-known thing. Obviously, it's not new to anybody on this show that this is like what's happening, but we're just going to document and show here how it's all melting down for the BTC guys, so that hopefully this is a bit of a compilation that people can send just on Twitter threads like, oh, you're in this in unreality bubble. Here you go. Look at this and wake up. And also to show that this same thing is happening with the Democratic Party right now in the US elections. And it was the same thing that happened with COVID. It's the same thing that happens over and over again with any of these kind of mass hysterias or propaganda campaigns. So it's quite important for the Bitcoin Cash audience to understand how these things play out so that we can avoid, obviously, any of these tactics being used against BCH as it was in the past, and probably undoubtedly as people will attempt to in the future. So let's have a listen to David Sachs here about the Democratic Party.
Collection of interests who want to remain in power. The Democratic Party is the party of government. Its goal is to allocate money and power from the government to the collection of interests who back the Democratic Party. In other words, it's basically a collection of interests who want to loot the republic. Well, obviously, no one's going to vote for that. So they have to make it about something else. They choose a figurehead. They talk about how this is about saving democracy. They basically invent hoax after hoax, lie after lie to basically maintain their power. And I think what's happened is the mask has come off. The whole thing, the whole shell game has been revealed. It's obvious that Biden was always a puppet for these interests who are hiding behind him. And now it's all being exposed.
So there you go. That's kind of it in a nutshell. And you could play that same clip and just have him saying the exact same things, but just sub in like Blockstream are the ones controlling the strings. They have Bitcoin Core. They have the power brokers behind the scenes. They put out all these hoaxes to their end users. They have some kind of other, cover narrative, which in their case is store of value and how that's going to be the be all and end all. And if you have sound money or whatever, Michael Saylor is kind of like the Biden equivalent or the front man who just shills this and that endlessly to the plebs, the taco holding node runner plebs who then all nod along like this all makes sense, and it gets reinforced by the podcasters and so forth in the BTC scene, all this disinformation. And then at the end of the day, eventually reality kind of pricks the bubble, word starts to get in from the outside because you can only fool, they say you can fool everyone all of the time. You can fool everyone some of the time, or some of the people all of the time, but not everyone all of the time. So eventually some reality seeps into this completely fake narrative, and then the entire thing collapses as the rank and file suddenly wake up like, oh my God, what's been going on? Who could have seen this coming? Blah, blah, blah. And everybody on the outside is like, yeah, that's really obvious. So we've seen that obviously recently with the Craig Wright thing, BSV. That was a whole scam, well documented, well pointed out by many people. But the people who were in the BSV community couldn't see it until finally there was that court case, and it all sort of came out to an extent that it's finally penetrated their minds like, wait, we're the bad guys, we're on the wrong side. And then they suddenly have this whole moment of like, holy shit, how have I been wrong about this the whole time? Well, that's the same thing that's happening with the Democrat media in the US with all the commentators and stuff. It's only like, how could we have known that Joe Biden was too feeble and unfit to run as president? And who's been running the country this whole time if he was, completely unable to do it and so forth? And it's like, but it's their own team that have been gaslighting them. So they need to work through like, wait, it was our own sources of information that we trusted that lied to us. It wasn't even just an accident or they got it wrong or the information wasn't available. No, it was definitely available. And in this case, all the Republicans knew about it, just like in the BTC case, all the BCHs and all of the rest of crypto knows that this whole store of value, Michael Saylor stuff is basically just gaslighting and talking his own book. But when you're inside the information bubble, that comes as a huge shock to you once there's a critical tipping point, which in this case happened to be the presidential debate, where it's just the truth is so obvious that all of the little NPC crowd followers finally realize, like, wait, is this the truth? Is this what we have been betting all our credibility on? And then they need to sort of figure out, how could they have been unaware that reality was completely different to what they believed, right? So that's that's kind of the context of what's going on. Chet, get in here a little bit and tell me, is this an accurate analogy or parallel that I'm drawing?
Yeah, I think so. Have you seen the Time magazine cover?
No, what one's that?
So it was like I saw it immediately after I watched the debate. It's all red. It's got Biden on it, like kind of walking off the frame. And the only word on it, aside from time at the top, is on the complete other side of the cover. It just says panic. And I feel like you said, that tipping point moment like was there for the world to see. And when we have that tipping point moment happen with BCH, we're gonna need to use that cover. We're gonna need to make some memes.
Yeah. Well, we'll have them all stocked up and in preparation. Of course, there's an element. Again, for people who want to go and look into this, like I said, you go look up Scott Adams on Twitter and look into, he loves all this stuff, right? So he's doing documenting, and he's like sarcastically retweeting all these Democrat people who are like, oh, can you believe these George Orwell quotes? Like, the party told the people to reject the evidence of their own eyes and ears. Wow, like, what a genius. And it's like, well, that is literally what the Republican commenters have been saying to this person having this grand moment of insight, like for the last 5 years. And they're always like, oh, these shitty Republican shills or idiots or whatever. And then finally, of course, like it tends to be, like you said, a very sudden reversal. There's a tipping point moment at which suddenly the penny drops and it's like the scales fall from their eyes. It's usually not like step by step by step. It kind of goes step by step by step. The doubts kind of creep in, and then there's a bit of, I don't know, and there's a bit of copium and explaining things away and so forth and so forth. And then there's a critical moment at which it's just like, fuck, guys, I was completely wrong. And we've seen that in the BCH case. Like, for instance, with Ray Youssef, he went through that whole period of, I don't know, guys, like, seems something's a bit wrong. Why are all the laser eyes salty when I'm trying to make a medium of exchange, And then he just finally made a post, which I shouted him out for. It was a great one where he said, okay, guys, I was fooled. I was late to the party here. Fuck me, I was wrong. And credit to him, because he straight up realized it. It's like reality has not changed when you're the one having that moment, and everybody does, to be fair, right? I'm not immune to this. Nobody is immune to this. It's just on different subjects at different times. Is when you're the one who has that moment, what you have to realize is that reality hasn't changed. You have. Like, people get into this trap sometimes where they figure it out and then they think, oh, I figured it out at the exact moment that it changed. And that's their story to themselves, when you need to understand, no, everybody else, or a lot of other people, especially people you probably mocked or pushed back on or didn't listen to, had been living in that reality that whole time. And so you kind of need to take an L and say, okay, guys, you had it right and I had it wrong, because you're never going to be able to rework things productively for yourself from that point forward unless you can see it through that lens of, here's the story and here's where I caught up to it, rather than the story changed and I happened to be at the exact right moment conveniently for my ego.
Another parallel that I'm just kind of thinking of is, like, there was a moment where Biden was like, the U.S. Border Patrol has endorsed me. And then the next morning they put out the tweet that was like, just to be clear, we have never endorsed Biden. And it makes me think of Craig Wright being like, I own these addresses. And then those addresses signing a message. It's like, Craig Wright is a liar and a fraud and not Satoshi. Has there ever been something like that in the BTC realm where someone's like making this outrageous claim and then like an address signs and says, fuck no?
That's a good question. I mean, there's been plenty of lies that have been totally exposed. Like, well, we did that segment on the show, you remember, with Pete Rizzo at the start of this year, where he had his whole story about the BCHers. They're in a different reality, man. They're listening to different podcasts and whatever it is that he says. And then he explains all those things about, like, well, we had this block size increase, but the BCHers couldn't accept a reality that was different to theirs. And then he gives all this gaslighting, like lies, like one after another, that are all just patently false. They're all provably, anybody can go, look, look that stuff up and just see that exactly what I explained was what actually happened. And obviously it's now all documented in Hijacking Bitcoin as well too, but all the narrative rewriting. But yeah, the whole like SegWit was a block size increase. That's a complete psyop. Like that's one of these hoaxes, right? Just like Joe Biden is fine. And the thing is, here's one other point that's important to note about these information bubble pops is you still have the last rats on the ship. So after this debate, Jill Biden, Joe Biden's wife, was at this post event, and she does this super patronizing thing where she says, like, you did it, Joe. You answered all the questions. It's like treating him like he's about 3 years old, because maybe his mental state is at about that kind of level of awareness, right? And like all the people in the crowd are like, yay, Joe Biden, and it's like they are still in that deluded reality. But what has happened is once the bubble pops, it just collapses down very quickly to just this tiny little group of people who are still inside with their minds still trapped in that, fake reality, right? And so that's what we're going to see at some point with BTC, right? There'll be a moment like when BCH hits 0.1 BTC, or when it hits 0.5, or when it hits 0.9, or maybe when the flippening happens and the price of BTC, the whole chain clogs up, all the flippening stuff that I explained on episode 85, there's going to be a moment when that kicks in, or maybe slightly before, where everyone, in quotation marks, in the BTC community has like a snap to reality moment, but some of them will be left behind, and they're not going to make it over that jump, and they're going to have just a really, really hard time in the following period after that, until eventually they one by one, figure it out. But that's going to take them a long time and with insane pain, and nobody's really going to care, because after the first round of I told you so's, everyone moves on to the next topic,
I think there's going to be so much extreme cognitive dissonance too. You're going to have people where after BTC, like, shits the bed completely, shits the bed so hard the bed falls out from underneath it. Like, you're going to have people going, well, Bitcoin served its place. And I think at the end of the day, they're just people that haven't realized that they're fiat maximalists. They're going to be like, Bitcoin served its place. We accomplished X, Y, Z. Peer-to-peer payments are so much easier nowadays. Like, we don't need this inefficient data space database anymore. And it's still going to be like, I did the right actions at the right time all of the time.
Yeah, that's what I was saying about that narrative of like, even once reality just like crams reality down your throat, it's like, well, it changed, but it changed at the exact moment that I changed my mind. And so I was therefore justified right up until things changed. Then reality changed. So I, of course, changed my behavior, very reasonable of me, and, was correct not only up until that moment, but also afterwards, because I just adjusted with the changing information when it's not true.
I think the distinction is like one very small degree of separation, where it's like, as the ball is rolling, like whenever they change their mind, it's like, okay, now we're on this different path. Like, there's something that's actually different. The person that I'm talking about are like, they will write it down to zero till the very end, and they're still going to believe that they did the right thing, like, the whole time.
Well, there's still BSV people like that, right?
Right.
We've seen, even after the BSV community had this moment, there's not many of them left, right? A lot of it has all just gone completely, and a lot of them have had, their comeuppance either internally or, publicly. And then, but there's still a few that are still in there, like, BSV is the real Bitcoin. Like, Craig Wright just wasn't recognized by the courts, and he's going to come back, guys. Just wait and see. Like, yeah, some people just go to zero. Yeah.
It was like 2 weeks ago, I found a BSV account that I had never seen before in my life. And I went through their tweets, and they were like very still pro BSV, and they weren't getting like any engagement. And I actually felt bad, because it's like, this person's just screaming in a silo. Like, there's no, like, how do you even approach this person to be like, hey, like, for the benefit of your own mental health, maybe just take a week off. Like, just stop thinking about this so much.
Yeah, and people will write that off sometimes and be like, oh, it's just bots or it's Calvin Chills. No, this is real people. Like, one of the things that was said about Twitter when they were trying to like clean up the bots was that people act like bots. And I'm not even just saying that to be dismissive or like, haha, people are NPCs or anything, but they genuinely do. Like they found an account that tweeted, the weather in Surrey every day at like 6 p.m. on the dot or something like that. And they were like, this is a
Just
bot. And
Frankie
they
the
banned
Cannibal.
it. And then, yeah, it was just like some old lady who was
Yeah.
obsessed with the weather and had been for 30 years. And she just did that every day very happily. That was her thing that she liked doing. And then
Yeah.
she complained and was like, why'd you ban my account for being a bot? I'm not a bot. Like, they talk to her. And people behave like bots. They make nonsensical statements that look like they could have come out of Chat GPT nonsense. They have all kinds of stupid contradictory opinions and don't see the difference. They have random schedules that they post at or all kinds of stuff. Like, so it's very hard to tell people and bots apart in some ways. And I'm sure there are a couple of people trapped in that little BSV mindset, and there's going to be some in BTC after it all goes kaboom too, right?
Yeah, that reminds me. There's a few people that I haven't spoken to in a couple of years that I should probably reach out to and be like, "Hey, how have things been?" BCH is still welcoming if you're interested in peer-to-peer decentralized currency.
Yeah, well, we're always here, and that's also one reason that I'm really glad we have the show, because for people like that, if they ever wonder like what the hell happened, all the episodes of the show are there, and if they really want to do the work, they can go back and listen to it all, and we've covered it all in real time, what's actually happening, and so they can listen to that and then compare it to their memory of what was going on, and then maybe with some fresh information, kind of fuse that together to figure out an actual coherent narrative of what happened. But that's much harder to do if you don't have that historical data source to compare against it. And obviously that's only for the minority of people who do want to make the effort to actually figure it out. And they don't just keep coping or sweep it under the bed. They actually want to learn some lessons and avoid it happening in the future. But I'm glad it's there for those people. Okay. So like I said, in the last couple of weeks, we've really started to see these realities set in on the BTC community. So let's take a look at a few examples. And in the past, we've often done one example at a time or something, but here we're just going to do like a sequence of them, and you can see it happening from every different angle. So the first one is actually a clip involving me, which is I just recently finished my 3-part 6-hour plus debate with Lorenzo Ray on Joel Valenzuela's channel. The full things are up there and you can go and watch the whole 6 hours. I know it was quite popular, like a bunch of people watch different segments of it, and we will hopefully, I think, get around to republishing the whole thing as just one video on this channel. So if you want to listen to all that, you can. But I can save you basically 6 hours of time, and I've cut it down to there's just a 2.5 little minute segment that just perfectly encapsulated the whole debate, which was where I was trying to take some BCH donations and Lorenzo was trying to take some BTC donations, and obviously BCH worked flawlessly and BTC kind of didn't. And this wasn't a planned thing that we had, so it just organically happened, and it just proved the exact point, like live on the spot in an unedited way. So we've got a little clip of that which cuts together a couple of parts of the debate there.
People in the comments who are asking for donation addresses, and they said, wow, this guy, dude, these freaking names are so long, I can't even.
Let's go, baby.
He says, if I send you $30, can you forward 10 to Lorenzo via Lightning and 10 to Jeremy? For the second part of that question, yes. For the first part, I was using Phoenix Wallet, and I'm unfortunately in the U.S. where it's banned now. So I just checked on-chain fees; they're like $5. So
R.I.P. There we go. Case closed. I win the debate. Done.
So basically, I could find a way if you want to do that. But alternatively, you could both post your whatever addresses in the comments of YouTube, this specifically, by the way.
Yeah, sure.
But if anyone has any questions from the audience, feel free to hit them in. In the meantime, we can wrap it up since it's like an hour 23 minutes, but we could also, like, if you guys
No,
have
no,
juicy,
I got a
juicy
few things.
minutiae you wanted to jump into, now's
Yeah,
the
yeah,
time.
yeah.
Now's the time while people get their
Yeah,
questions
quick
ready.
thing. Will the person accept a Lightning invoice, or he's donating some other crypto, and then so because I can send a Lightning invoice.
Yeah, so
if you
Jingle
can.
Bob, what do you think? Just let me know while you're doing this, in case he's still watching. He might have just taken off. By the way, a friend of mine just chimed in, says greetings from the People's Republic of Canada. Good seeing you, dude. Yeah. Unfortunately.
Or if he wants to send me some other crypto, I'll happily take it in my Binance account, trade it for BTC, and withdraw via Lightning to my non-custodial Lightning wallet. So I can also do that.
Oh, look, there we go. I just got some donations. Thank you very much, viewer, for donating me some BCH.
Point for BCH. The YouTube
Yes.
chat doesn't allow me to post my full Lightning invoice because it's too long. So I have to post twice, and then the donator has to, reattach them together. So yeah, these Lightning invoices are way too long. We need to fix that.
I got another donation, by the way. So thank you to the other.
Nice.
So just at the end there, Jingle Bob said, Lorenzo, post a BTC address. I'll just eat the on-chain fee. And then Lorenzo says, yeah, thanks, man. So they did sort it out in the chat. And I guess Jingle Bob ended up paying a $5 on-chain transaction fee to send $10 because the Lightning Network just wasn't workable. Meanwhile, I had just received 2 donations, no problem, exactly like that. This is a completely unplanned, fair test on a neutral channel. BCH just works. It just works. That's what the BCH community has been saying since the fucking beginning. And BTC just doesn't. When it comes to it, there's some problems, there's some issues, there's some excuses. There's, the on-chain fees are high. My non-custodial Phoenix wallet has been banned in the US because it was all a bit dodgy. Like, there's just problem after problem after problem. Yeah, exactly. Well, it's sendership resistant because you can't even fucking send it anywhere. And that's just a classic example, right, that we happened to catch on this stream. So I edited together these clips and I posted it up and I said, look, here's an example of just BCH works and BTC doesn't. And, credit to Lorenzo for doing the debates with me and everything like that. I actually think overall it was actually a pretty good debate. He was actually quite reasonable and he actually delivered and followed through on the debates, unlike some of these other guys who've, we've invited on the show, or there's been other things, they've always fallen through. He did actually turn up for it. So props to him for that. But in this kind of scenario where it's just clear that he's wrong, there's no question about it. Instead of just taking the L and being like, okay, maybe BTC isn't working, he just had to go back and keep rewriting the narrative and finding excuses and all this. I've got some comments here on the slides. I'm not going to read them all out, but he basically said, look, the world wants store of value. They don't care about medium of exchange. That'll come later, blah, blah, blah. And I said, look, you couldn't store any value in your currency because you couldn't even receive it, right? It's just obvious right there. And then he said, well, the audience of the show was mostly BCH people, which it might have been, but if it was, one, that's irrelevant. Whether the BTC or BCH network is functioning is not related to who is watching a podcast. And 2, even if that was the case, that was just because I did a better job of promoting the stream than he did. And he was big upping himself as I'm this big TikTok influencer of BTC and I've got 100K followers and stuff like that. If he didn't have any BTC people in the debate that could do a quick demonstration and show that BTC was working great, that's on him. That's not on me. It's not my job to get the audience to come in from the BTC side. That's the whole point of a BTC to BCH debate. He's got to bring the BTC audience. So it's a nonsense excuse anyway. But even if they had, like, we had somebody there who was obviously a crypto user, was happy to send him BTC in whatever way he wanted. Lightning Network wasn't feasible. They paid an on-chain fee, which was clearly not economically viable, only just because that user took pity. Did it even make any sense at all? And so it's just like, it's just that simple. Reality is starting to speak louder than anybody can really hide anymore, no matter how much on these podcasts or Twitter threads they're saying, no, BTC is the best, BTC is the best. Now that we have clips increasingly like this, you can just post that in the Twitter thread, and that's just it. The debate is over. There's no arguing with that. It's incontrovertible, right? But then Lorenzo just still cannot see it. He cannot accept and just take an L and say, you know what, Jeremy, you were right. You were right. It's not working. Maybe I need to rethink my point of view. Maybe even if BTC is a great store of value, it's not going to be workable as money until we fix these issues. But of course, once he starts digging into that onion and peeling back those layers, it all just turns into, well, read Hijacking Bitcoin and listen to the whole history of the Bitcoin Cash podcast, and hello, you're back to reality. But that's just, 9 years of context that he has to take an L on before he can move forward, right?
Yeah, especially for people that aren't used to accepting that they've held held a belief for a long period of time that was incorrect, and then spent the time not just to be like, oh, this is wrong, but how does this impact my life? Here's how I'm going to change my life with this new, like the integration part of it's so difficult. So if like this is your first time, you're like, oh shit, I don't know if there's much to save. Like I feel like it's can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Yeah, and that's it. And it's just like change happens when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of changing. And right now, he's presumably not sending that many BTC transactions in his daily life. He's running his node. He's shilling to his TikTok followers who whatever are in the same cult and they believe it, a lot of it or whatever. But they're not actually using this on a daily basis, because if they would be running into these problems and thinking this is unacceptable. But they're just not. And so then that's when the opportunity presents for it to be proven, it fails. And then he's like, oh, and he has to come up with excuses and so forth later. Okay, so that's just one example, but that was obviously involving me. This is not just me dunking on Lorenzo. The word is starting to get out because this reality is reality. So every day people are trying to use the BTC network and they're discovering that it's not working, no matter how much propaganda they're being fed. So we have an example here from another guy who's a developer working on some kind of stuff with the El Salvador, and he also had some thoughts on the current state of BTC. So let's have a look at what he had to say.
Isn't ready for Bitcoin. It's Bitcoin isn't ready for El Salvador. It's us Bitcoin developers who are failing you guys, and I firmly believe this. So we can separate two things here: the store of value and medium of exchange, right? So on store of value, Bitcoin is kicking ass, but on the medium of exchange property, how fast, how cheap, how anonymously you can send money to other people, and how easily. Well, Bitcoin is not doing well, not even with the Lightning Network. It is failing a lot. Us Bitcoin developers are failing you in this sense, but hopefully we can come up with something. The thing is, it's not that as
see that, and the thing is they did come up with something, and that's what I posted in this thread, got a lot of likes, where I said the Bitcoin developers did come up with something. It's called BCH. BCH is the fix, the community that realized, okay, you need to raise the block size and you need to reverse RBF and take that out, and you need to not do SegWit, and you need to not go down this huge propagandized rabbit hole in the first place, right? That was the fix. But here this guy is years and years and years later, and I don't know how long he's been involved in BTC, so he might not have been there for all of it, but he's going to keep running his head into this wall that BTC is not workable as a medium of exchange until not just, it's like in his mind, it's like, well, there must be some small problem here and we can tinker this or we can tweak this or we can fix this and just get past this one next little technical problem. But that's not it. It's the huge stack of lies and assumptions and everything that's built on it. It's like mentally kicking the can down the road just a little bit, just like with Joe Biden. Maybe all the people who were putting him up on that stage, well, that was probably deliberate because they probably wanted to kick him out, the powers that are actually running the show. But some of the people involved somewhere along the line were telling themselves, no, it's not that bad. It's just a little, it's just workable. We just had a bad day. He's just a bit out of it. He's a bit sick. He's a bit tired. He's whatever. And they just could find excuses and copes for the mounting continuous evidence that it just is not working. And Insanity is doing the same thing, expecting different results. And that's the BTC community, the ones who are genuinely like this guy and honestly trying to make it work. Is they're working hard and they're trying to figure out a way to get the BTC to work as a medium of exchange, but it's never going to happen because it has been deliberately and systematically undermined so that it will not work, which is what the BCH community have been telling them, and what they would have to take a huge humbling L and rework their whole narrative of all of the cryptocurrency and all their emotional investment, probably life decisions that they've made. How many hundreds of hours has this guy spent programming on these apps trying to figure it out, you know? And this idea of Bitcoin is failing, like he's able to say that now. I don't know. He's got like 17,000 Twitter followers. He's sort of, you know, must be some sort of minor influencer in the BTC side of thing. Probably spent years of his life. Probably lots of his friends are in the BTC community. Probably feels it's a big part of his identity. He's told his family and all that he's big into Bitcoin, and he's tried to shill it to them and get it to work and so on and so forth. And just the emotional damage of even just admitting is the first step, right? Even just admitting that it's failing is like, after 7 years of all this gaslighting, I know Bitcoin's perfect and it's immutable money and it's going to take over the world. And they'll often say something like, yeah, well, we're working on it, guys. We'll get there in the end. You know, it's not perfect yet, but it will be by the time it's ready for, you know, billions of people in 20 years time or whatever. But like I've explained on that show, no, the shot is now. Now is the time. There is no, I'm 25, but I'll be ready to be in the NBA by the time I'm 45. No. By that point, you're too old and you've missed it. And some other 25-year-old is in there today. And by the time you're 45, there'll be 5 more generations that are in there. That's exactly what's happening. And they don't have that kind of time. We saw with Apple rolling out Apple Pay, you know, so on and so forth, right? So for him to actually understand, to rework his whole assumption that we can do store of value and medium of exchange is just a technical fix, and to switch it around, medium of exchange is what you've got to get to work, and then store of value comes from people flooding in to use it as a medium of exchange, just requires him to rewrite so much of his own mental narrative, right? And that's a very, very hard pill to swallow. Of course, this stuff with El Salvador completely failing is exactly what the BCH community said, you know, that it wouldn't work. It would devolve into custodial solutions, which it has with the Chivo wallet. Bukele hasn't been very transparent. Most of the users just cashed out their free crypto as fast as possible into fiat. As far as I'm aware, there's no sizable, there might be some sort of Bitcoin to Bitcoin economy going on there, like a little bit, but nothing serious, nothing on the scale of what was the grand vision, you know, 3 years ago. It was 2021, right? When this was all getting hyped around the time of the BTC conference in 2021, right? So 3 years later, it just is not working. And of course, eventually they keep running into that wall. Sooner or later, you get frustrated enough that you ask, what am I doing wrong? And the answer is not just a small fix to Lightning Network, mate. I hate to say it, but it's not. It's actually BCH, and you've got to rethink everything from first principles. What did you get from this clip?
I saw this one, I think, like the day that it was kind of going around. And I don't know what there is to hold on to. Like, I think of the whole like splits being bad breakups and whatnot. And like BTC is the breakup that should happen but hasn't, right? Like, what is going, like, I don't, yeah, what is there to hold on to? Why are people still clutching to BTC? Like, what is the hope? Like, we're going to do this eventually? When? How many years are we going to be like, yeah, we'll do this eventually?
Well, it's the brand. There's a lot of things that you can, like, to steelman the case, there's a lot of things that you can use to sort of reinforce your code. Now, to be honest, obviously, I don't agree with anything. I think this is complete code. But if you're smart enough, you can be smart enough to fuel your own copes, you know, and like Eric Wall is a classic example of this. Why doesn't he just switch sides? He's clearly got it. Are we the bad guys? And he realized, yes, we are, right? But he's still, in his own mind, I'm sure what he's thinking to himself is the network effect is so valuable. If we switch to BCH, we can never catch up to that. Of course, it's the other way around. The network effect is actually what's ossifying them into an unworkable situation on BTC, and BCH while it's hard work to accept, okay, we're going to have to start again from, not from scratch exactly, but we're going to have to take a few steps, 2 steps back to get 5 steps forward. That's a hard thing to swallow. Oh, the brand clout is still enormous. The personal ego cost of I was wrong and I told all these guys they were shitcoiners for 7 years and that, was a completely fake, and I have egg on my face for all of that. Like I said, the personal social networks and reputation, like all of my friends who all agree with me that BTC is the way, are all going to be, I'm going to be the outcast from all of that. There's so many layers of excuses that you can use, which is why it takes such a high threshold of years and years and years and years of failing before the pain gets so high that they're willing to accept making that alternative sacrifice to actually move beyond that roadblock, right? I think that's kind of the summary.
That makes sense. I like thinking specifically about the breakups too. Like I feel like I'm a lot more eager to be like, this clearly isn't working out. Like nothing's changing here. Let's just part ways amicably and, be happy with that. And maybe this is just a personality difference. Like, I don't know.
Well, the sunk cost fallacy is a thing for a reason, right?
Yeah.
Humans have an inbuilt bias to keep doing whatever they've been doing. And especially if you are the kind of person who has an internal locus of control, which is usually quite healthy, then you feel like I can change this. I can improve things. I can work through this. And in the BTC case, the BTC community as a whole can figure out a way past this roadblock.
Oh, wait, hold on. Do you think the promise, like the hope in the future, is that we get more people on it? Do you think it's to make it more valuable, or do you think it is some combination of the two? Like, well, the real drive
varies. Well, it varies from person to person, but there's a large segment that are in it for let's just get rich in fiat, number go up. And I really respect someone like Brian, who we talk to on Twitter Spaces sometimes, who he's at least transparent about that. He's like, that's what I'm here for. And he doesn't have all these delusions about all this other stuff. Then you have some people who have that motivation subconsciously, but consciously they need to justify it as, I'm this really principled Bitcoiner from the early days and I'm a cypherpunk and blah, blah, blah. Even though it's nothing like that project, and they either weren't there or they found some way to convince themselves that they went with the sheep rather than stood up, like a courageous individual and stuck to the principles that they were espousing, because again, then they would have to admit the BCHs were right and they were wrong and blah, 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 all that other stuff, right? So it's a bit of a combination. But I think like this guy seems very genuine to me, right? When he's saying this stuff, we're failing. It's not that El Salvador is failing. We're failing El Salvador. We're not providing a good enough service, a good enough experience, something that would genuinely motivate people in El Salvador, poor people on the ground who need these tools, who everybody has been saying are not going to be able to use this store of value bullcrap that is slow and expensive and reversible and custodially held by your authoritarian government. Like, that's just not going to work. But they want it to. They want it to so badly.
Yeah. Have you followed El Salvador stuff? Like, I remember we had spoke about the Chivo wallet having a bunch of bugs. Is it the case? Do I have it like in my head correct that like the only legal way to use Bitcoin is to use their Chivo wallet?
No, I think you can use anything you want. It's just that the Chivo wallet was how you got the $30 airdrop custodially, which people then immediately cashed out. And I also think like when Mark Falzon was there, I don't remember the specifics, but there was like the Bitcoin Beach app, which I'm not sure if I feel like that's kind of different, but maybe somehow related to Chivo wallet. And that was needed to pay, kind of like how we had to use the bitcoin.com wallet for some stuff in Ljubljana. Like they had some kind of setup like that. Like you specifically needed these specific wallets because it wasn't all just operating on the base BCH protocol, so I think there was a bit of an element of that, basically.
I was asking because I'm curious, like, how much is it that it's, Chivo failing, how much of it is Lightning failing, and then how much of it is like the base chain is failing? Obviously,
well, I think it's all of them. It's all of them, and there's just such a pile of problems that at any one time, it's like one part of it's failing or it's all failing. And so just there's no way to make because it's like poison. The tree is poisoned at the root, so it doesn't matter how big the branches grow or whatever, the poison still just seeps into there. Like it's what emergent reason always says, ex falso quod libet, right? From falsehood, any premise can emerge. Like once you start with 1 + 1 = 3, you can come up with any system of mathematics that justifies whatever you're doing, but it's still all going to be fake because you've built it on these cornerstone lies. And that's what the whole hijacking Bitcoin is about, right? They have that fake belief in their mind that it's still decentralized, that it wasn't co-opted, that Blockstream didn't maliciously and nefariously jam up the works of the development process and its ability to be used as a P2P currency and so forth. And so because they have those fake false beliefs, that then leads to poor technical decisions with SegWit and RBF and so forth. And then that leads to them all justifying it on podcasts. And then that leads to the tech being broken. And then that leads to custodians in El Salvador. And then that leads to it not getting adopted. And then it leads to this guy making a video being like, what's going on? But he can't just dig one level deep. He has to dig through the entire stack and get to the bottom before he can rebuild a solid, foundation, right?
Yeah, which I think I saw a shadow post on Telegram, like essentially like agencies and the government have been doing to kind of compromise conferences and things like that. And it talks about having committees that are no smaller than 5 people to make sure that like things, you just have to make things big and complex and confusing enough that the average person, even if they want to dig, doesn't know where to start, right?
Yeah, you just create so much chaos and bureaucracy that, like well-intentioned people are just always stuck at the outside trying to like fix the things when the core of it is just a broken, twisted mess of wire that nobody can untangle, right? By design. And then everybody's busy, painting the outside of the ship or whatever, and just the inside is just like it's never ever going to fly. But as long as they don't realize that, they can happily work away on the corner edges without sort of confronting the core of the issue. Especially when they're being gaslit by, the so-called senior engineers who are the ones standing next to the flaming wreckage of the internal system and telling them, no, it's fine. We're just the experts that will cover it, that will voodoo magic make this work somehow. Go back to what you were doing. Nothing to see here with the fireworks and the house exploding in the background. It's just that. Okay, we got the next one here is from Bitcoin Mechanic on the Bitcoin Matrix podcast. Now, there's a full episode with a couple of good clips in it, but this was just the one that got shared on Twitter and has some nice thematic music has been added to it. But this is still hitting on the same theme. So let's hear what he had to say.
DC waiting to happen at the moment. If you can't have access to on-chain, if you can't run your own node, if there's only a couple of people making templates, it just means that's centralization. Bitcoin is a decentralized bank digital currency, right? Like, so if it becomes centralized, by definition, it is a central bank digital currency, right? And the minute you centralize it, it is that. Like, whoever that third party is that's handling your Bitcoin related affairs for you is surveilling you. It's requiring your permission. It's going to ask for your ID, and it's smart money, so it can do annoying things like give you UTXOs that can't be spent for a year, or force you into multi-sigs that they have a key to and you have a key to. So you can only ever spend your money if you have their permission. Programmatically, rather than cash, where you could spend it without their permission. They just need to not find out. Like, Bitcoin stops being that kind of thing. So yeah, Bitcoin is a CBDC waiting to happen. It's a nightmare unless we get it back on track. And this is so troublesome. This is absolutely horrific. But I'm sorry, it's true. I hate to say it. It's just something we're sleepwalking into at the moment.
So there you have it. He's having a slightly different set of problems to the previous guy that we had, where he's worried about the mining full centralization, specifically the construction of the block templates. So even if there's lots of people that have their home Bitcoin miners and they're fairly distributed, or there's some small ones and some big ones and whatever, but if they're all mining at pools, which are the ones directing what actually goes into the block, and especially if several of the pools are just offshoots of one of the pools, then it's really not that decentralized from a mining point of view. So with Ocean Mining and Luke Jr., he's trying to fix that by offering an alternative. Now, he's fighting a good fight. He's onto something. I think he's a great guy. I would love to have him in Team BCH because I think he's spot on. I think there is a really big problem here, and he's really onto something. But, and I mean, he's even right about, he talks about in his mind, it goes back to the block size wars and the evil Chinese miners and Jihan Wu and stuff like that. And I even agree with him about that. Yeah, he's probably spot on. Obviously, Jihan was on the big block, and I have a slightly different take on that. But in general, he's actually correct that probably mining is overly centralized. It's a big issue. It really needs to be fixed and so forth. But the BCH community can't help out and can't fix that because we're too small and we're not enough of the hash rate for us to have the clout to really be able to make any difference. They're the ones that got all the price pumps and the money and the hash rate, as they're so fond of reminding us. So we're not in a position to fight that battle. He is somewhat in a position to fight that battle, but he can't make any progress because it's the same things, just it's a different symptom of the same disease. He is trying to get the community to listen to him. What about these decentralized templates? What about changing the filters on our nodes? What about this and that? But because he just still has this incorrect narrative to himself that nodes are the ones that tell, the truth to miners, and that the whole BCH was just Roger Ver and Jihan Wu's evil corporate takeover and blah, 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 blah. Blockstream are the good guys. Luke Jr. is a smart guy that is actually working in the best interest of Bitcoin, which is, it would be hard for him to unplug and say, no, wait, this guy was part of the sabotage, because he worked with him closely. He's probably his friend. He probably has a lot of good things going on with him. He's employed by him or directly involved with him or whatever. So I'm sure he, and Luke maybe even knows a lot about Bitcoin, has a lot of good ideas. And maybe he's not even maliciously involved in this so much as unintentionally or whatever. But the point is, because he just has this misconceived history of what's going on, he can't figure out why the Bitcoin project that he believed in, the BTC that it is now, is manifesting in a direction that doesn't fit his vision. Like, how is it that it's turning into this decent, CBDC style, like easily surveilled bullcrap with an entire community that it just seems oblivious to these issues that to him are really important, and they're just busy, happy with their number go up and repeating these same tropes over and over. It's because he was on the side that that pushed all those narratives and led to driving out everyone who disagreed with those narratives and who was smart. There was a huge brain drain. And so he was left with all the morons that just repeated the propaganda, who then a bigger fish came along, Michael Saylor, and just shilled all this stupid stuff. And they all followed along like little lemmings, right? And so he was a big part of causing that situation, but because he doesn't really understand that in his own mind, he just cannot understand now, when the results are plain in front of his face, that this is the Bitcoin that he created and the people that agreed with him created as well too. And like, he's just in as much of a tough situation as the other guys that we just looked at, like Lorenzo and like that other guy, and like the Democrats who are waking up to this reality on the political front, which is that for him to get past this roadblock, he's going to have to unwind layer after layer after layer of assumptions. Because if he listens to this show, he will think, no, but I just need to change this, or I just need to find the right way to pitch filters to the BTC community and get that adapted, or we'll just find a different way. Or that's like thinking only one level deep. That's not the core of the issue. And so just fighting the battle at that level, it's like treating the symptoms instead of the disease. If you just put cream on your skin over and over, but you actually have some kind of autoimmune disease, like your skin is just going to keep getting worse no matter how many Band-Aids or creams or ointments you put on the skin. If the disease is internalized, that's what you need to fix at the core. Otherwise, you're just never going to be able to get past these problems. They're just going to keep recurring. And so he is just having an absolutely terrible time. And I feel bad for him because, again, he's sitting in his room, like with his head in his hands, like trying to figure out what can we do? How can we fix this problem, and that's before any of the other, the other issues that are being had, just with the mining here. And then even worse, gosh, it's just layer upon layer. Even worse than this, and even more classic, is the response that he got from this clip, which is, I've got one here from John Carvalho, who replied and said, quote, "There is no track. Back on track," in quotation marks, just means off track, quotation marks, to the changes he wants. As far as I know, he mostly wants stupid changes that don't actually fix anything and make other things worse, end quote. And so this is another guy that is on his team, nominally, on Team BTC, is fighting him over his changes to try and fix BTC. So not only does he have to actually get the fix working, he has to convince a whole bunch of people that don't want to be convinced that his changes suck. And the most ironic thing about it is that John Carvalho is also unhappy with how BTC is. John Carvalho is like upset that RBF has got in, and he thinks that things need to change, and he's out there whinging away about BTC. But in John Carvalho's mind, his changes would be smart, and mechanics changes are evil and stupid and bad, and why would you want to change Bitcoin in that way? And that just leaves them at this huge gridlock. It's like not even logically consistent. If John Carvalho said, nobody should make any changes, that's my position, fine. But his position is, well, we're kind of going in the wrong direction, so we do need to change something, and I've got some ideas. But also at the same time, anybody who has any different ideas, which are not high on my agenda, they must be stupid and idiots and just want to change something that's not going to make any difference. And he's not the only one either. Like Shinobi is classically also the same, who will just adopt any position that whatever Shinobi says that can make Shinobi sound condescending and arrogant about everybody else, thinking that, they're such a midwit and they should all just not try and change Bitcoin because who do they think they are? But he himself is like, we need CTV, or we need whatever we need, and that's going to be the grand savior to save everything. And so they're just all in there together in this huge gridlock where everybody wants some changes, but nobody can agree on the right changes because nobody's treating the core disease. It's like the world's worst episode of House MD, One person's like, oh, he's bleeding out of his leg. One person's like, the skin is rotting off here. And one person's like, the foot needs amputation. And they're all like focused on their tiny little part of the problem. Like, this is the problem. It's lupus. It's never lupus, mate. Except for that one time, it's never lupus. When he just gets out the lupus textbook and he's like, they're like, you keep your drugs in a medical textbook? And he's like, it's never lupus. That's a great shout out, House MD, great show. But that's like what's happening. They're all looking at their individual symptom, and none of them has had the moment of clarity. Like, it's a systemic disease, and we need to fix that, and then all the other things, offshoots, will be fixed. But again, like, it's just the same as all the other people. If he went down that rabbit hole far enough, he would end up coming full circle to the Bcashes were right, and the whole history flows from 2015 and today. In 2024, they're celebrating Bliss and Abla launch, right? He would, if you deconstruct everything, that's the point that you get to. And we've, the point of what I'm trying to show here as well is it's everyone, it's everywhere. All of them know that there is a problem. It's become undeniable. Lorenzo is like, these Lightning invoices are not working. We've got to do something about it. That previous dev was like, look, we're not doing this medium of exchange. It's not working for El Salvador. Bitcoin Mechanic is like, what's going on with the mining pools? Like, this is a mess. John Carvalho is like, the RBF is kind of screwed. Like, what are we doing here? Eric Wall and the Wizards that we had 2 episodes ago are like, we need OpCat, but we can't convince all these guys. Like, it's a complete mess, and we're trying to get them to listen, and it's not fucking working. Like, all of these guys all have different disagreements with each other about what the problem is, but they all know there's a problem, and none of them are getting anywhere towards a solution because they all have these same copes and lies in their fundamental, worldview, right? So, yeah, I don't know. Any comments on this aspect of it?
Not really. I love House so much. That's about it. I'm now just thinking, if this were a disease, which disease would it be? How do we die? It's definitely some like autoimmune disorder, right? The organs are failing, your eyes are sloughing out of your skull. Like,
but I was watching some House MD clips recently, so that's part of why I've seen that whole show like at least twice. It's such a good show. I think there's so many good, some parts of it are pretty cheesy, but there's so much in that show, in that every episode is basically the same formula, but at the end there's a couple of key patterns that'll always be like, wait, we had the answer at the start, but there was this one thing kind of covering it up. And so we were doing things and then we misattributed what we were doing. And then at the end, if you take away that one wrong assumption we made, boom, then everything else makes sense. Like there's often a kind of moment of clarity that they have like that. Or they will have one where it's like, okay, he had disease A, but then he also had disease B, and we were assuming it was one disease, but it was actually two. And if you break it down into those two different things, it's actually really easy to fix. Or, there was some factor that we didn't know about, like the guy was lying to us that he never had drugs because he was being a Christian pastor his whole life or something, and he promised his dead ex-girlfriend that he couldn't tell anyone or something. And if we'd figured that out, then it would have explained all this stuff. Like it's always comes down to having the wrong mental model and some kind of assumptions that then led you to be unable to find the root cause of the issue.
So there's so many episodes where he comes in and he proposes like two different sets of medicines, and then Cameron would be like, "Oh, if we give him this one, you're going to kill the patient." And then there's like,
let's give him that one.
Yeah. Do you want him to suffer for the next 6 months in a hospital, or you want to find out what's wrong with him? It's like, who's going to be that guy to step in for BTC and be like, listen, you guys are fucked up. We're going to have to do some serious changes. It's not going to be pleasant. You might die.
It's us, dude. That's us. That's the role that we are playing with this and the BCH community generally, right? But the reason we're doing this segment, one of the reasons, is that afterwards I can clip it out. It's going to be a long clip. It's going to be like a 30-minute clip or something like that, and post it to all these guys and tag them all and say, watch this, guys. And they probably have me muted or blocked. Maybe they don't want to, but somebody will watch it and hopefully mention it to them or something. And at least one of them has got to just watch this. Who is doing this in the BTC community? Like, this is the Bitcoin Cash fucking podcast. This is not the BTC core like shill fest. How come they don't have a single person anywhere who would do what I've done and found this clip, this clip, this clip, this clip, and could just break it down point by point by point by point by point with the examples and what's wrong and how to fix it and everything like that. What they need, right?
Yeah,
here.
even if they don't like what you have to say, to just be like, okay, let's use this as the launching pad and like start working on some of these problems.
Yeah, exactly. But again, that just triggers the whole cognitive dissonance. Is like, how can these stupid B caches be seeing something that I can't? Obviously I have my version of the solution, but if you're watching this, guys, you don't need to take my word. Firstly, don't trust verify. All the clips are there, all the research is there. These are all people that you can talk directly to and will talk back. They won't talk to me, but they'll talk to you, so you can get to the bottom of it a lot faster, at least in theory, if you weren't all so deluded. But you don't, it's all there. Even if you don't agree with me on the solution, or you can talk to me though, I'm very happy to talk to any of you about it. Then just take it as this is a problem. I'm seeing things clearly because I'm not as in the weeds, and hopefully you can at least appreciate that there might be some objective merit to that. And it's not a case that they can dismiss. Who's this guy, Jeremy? He doesn't know what he's talking about. Well, watch a bit of the show and figure out, do I or do I fucking not know what I'm talking about, right? Am I not as passionate about Bitcoin? Well, I've done 120 episodes of this show, 2 hours, talking about it. You ask me, am I technically incompetent? Is there some reason like that? I built Selene Wallet, bro. Like, it's not that I can't figure that out. Do I not know the history? I was fucking there for all of it. It's just like whatever excuse you have to yourself. Is it because I'm trying to meddle with you and screw up BTC? Well, partially, yes. Obviously, I think you should switch to BCH and so forth, but I'm transparent about that. I'm not trying to lie. I'm not trying to hide it. And also, I'm too busy these days to really get in the weeds and disrupt all of you. I don't need to. The narrative's unraveling on its own. I'm busy shipping updates for Selene Wallet. So, take it or leave it, but it's all right there. All right, we got part 4, and then something else, which is also sort of like a part 5. Okay, here we go. So now we get to where is the part of the problem that the gaslighting is happening? These guys are all confused. What's happening? What's the problem? Who is the one who is injecting the poison into the patient? Who's the one who actually knows? Who's the character that's like the salty ex-boyfriend or whatever that was like secretly poisoning the tea with the arsenic that triggered this whole thing? Well, it's the propaganda wing of the party, isn't it? And who's that? Peter McCormack, What Bitcoin Did. So let's have a listen to what he had to say on his recent episode.
I'm spitballing an idea when I'm completely out of my depth.
And that's okay.
Can we wrap a little blockchain into a UTXO?
Yeah, and that's where you start getting into what I think is sort of like the zero knowledge proof-ish stuff.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, we'll like keep the blockchain over here and we can prove that the blockchain did XYZ thing, and we'll just put the proofs back in Bitcoin Core, like back in the Bitcoin blockchain. But all the data will live somewhere else. You start running into this problem of like, where's the data for it? Who needs to know about the data? Who has access to the data to verify that what happened in that chain is exactly correct as you would expect?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like this is like scaling is a hard problem.
Yeah.
It's like a very hard problem. And it's because of this like consensus. Like you come back to consensus, like who needs to be in consensus, who gets to participate in consensus. If you can't participate in consensus like that, like, are you really a self-sovereign member of that particular ecosystem? Like,
yeah. Cause I keep coming back to the idea. You either had to have gone the Roger Ver route, which is keep growing the blockchain, sacrifice decentralization, and more people can have UTXOs. We agree that's a terrible idea.
Yeah, I think so.
And so the better idea is to maintain decentralization, and UTXOs are a privilege. Until somebody solves something in between, I think that's where we're at. And it's like it's shit for people to hear, because essentially it's a 2-tier system. We have the we have the peasants and the elites, because the elites get the UTXOs and the peasants don't. I'm being facetious. But.
Yeah, I mean, it does sort of look that shape, doesn't it?
So I don't even really know who this girl is. Apparently, I just had a look. It's Nifty Nay on Twitter, but she's involved with Base 58 BTC, BTC++, runs Core, Lightning, and I think I saw somebody mentioning that she has something to do with Blockstream, right? But she's just, and I don't think she even necessarily has these like evil intentions, but she's just been brought up and what's the word, marinated in this culture of lies from the Blockstream and Bitcoin Core and all the technical developers and so forth there, she's now spreading out as this sort of perceived authority figure, right? Which is that she says, oh, it's all comes back to consensus. What was the whole fucking point of the block size war? It was this gaslighting about you need to have consensus. You don't have consensus, and consensus could never be defined. And in fact, it could never even be discussed, because if you brought it up, you were banned from our Bitcoin and you weren't allowed to talk at the conferences. And then if you were the one saying, well, what about if we make a change to consensus? Well, now you're a shitcoiner, altcoiner, Bitcoin XT shill, big blocker, get out of here, and you're banned, right? So anything will be considered, except for the actual root of the problem. There's just this endless gaslighting to preserve like a fog of confusion around it. I've got this meme here of the kombucha girl that I made. There's one where the girl has like the face like ooh, and then the face like I'd consider that. And the ooh face is raising the block size, and the I'd consider that face is everything else: Lightning Network, Liquid, Arc, Fedi Mint, coin pools, drive chains, recursive ordinals, Bitcoin VM, custodians, Litecoin, fiat currency, right? Aging like fine wine, like all my other memes. And she is just explaining this exact same thing. Now it's these ZK proofs, this zero knowledge, whatever, which has been backported from the Ethereum community, who that's what the solution they're looking at. It's not the right solution for Bitcoin. We have the UTXO model. Just fucking raise the block size, But that cannot be considered. That has to be heresy. But people are asking questions. And so what does Peter McCormack say? It's that same thing. Roger Ver, bad man. It's the exact same as Donald Trump, orange man, bad. Roger Ver, big block, man, bad. It's literally the identical.
Wait.
I can't make it more clear to you. That's what it is. It's Trump, orange man, bad, stay asleep. It's the same thing. And I know the guys from the BTC community, a lot of them are pro, Republican and sort of anti-Democrat, right? Trump, orange man, bad. Roger Ver, big block, billionaire man, bad. How you cannot see that it's the same playbook is beyond me, but it is. And just in this case, you're the one being fooled. And there's a huge false dilemma there. If we raise the block size, we sacrifice decentralization, and it's presented as this absolute unquestionable truth, which it is not. If the block size went from 1 megabyte to 1.1 megabyte, would BTC be instantly centralized and over? No, of course not. It's a spectrum. Decentralization is not you're decentralized or you're not. It's like you're very decentralized if you have 1 million nodes and a broad community and a diverse range of hash rate and adoption and political defense from grassroots activism and well-funded companies, supporting the scene and all these different metrics. But let's just break it down to nodes. You're very decentralized if you have 1 million nodes, and you're not you're very centralized if you have 1 or 2 or 5. But at 100 or 1,000 or 10,000, well, it's a spectrum, and it's the exact same thing. The block size is just trading off on a spectrum against those other interests that you need to have, like low transaction fees and throughput and so forth, right? So, or the need to store other data on the chain, a la, inscriptions, although that's another giant scam, basically. But the whole point is that it's a spectrum, not an absolute binary, but it's presented as a false dilemma. And it's so ridiculous because there's, of course, more gaslighting and lies and hoaxes to cover this all up. Because like we saw with that Pete Rizzo episode where he says, well, basically in the end, we did a block size increase. And then Peter says to him, no, that was a block weight increase. It wasn't a, SegWit wasn't technically a block size increase, and it wasn't back in the day, but now it's been rebranded. And apparently that was okay. And then Peter Todd on stage at Bitcoin Honey Badger is saying like, well, 40 megabytes, would actually be fine, but we've got 4 so that we've got a 10x headroom. Like, he's saying it right out there that it wouldn't be sacrificing decentralization at all, but it's whatever is the convenient narrative for the moment that will just be brought up to just continue this cycle of confusion and delusion. And if you think, and again, Peter McCormack, he's probably not some bad guy. I don't think this is maliciously out there. He's just a very convenient, well-placed rube. And you can see this because of the way that his opinion changes like the wind. If anybody who follows any of his content will know, with the ordinal stuff, he has somebody on who says ordinals are great. And then he says, yeah, I think ordinals are pretty cool. Let's just leave them. They're not doing any harm. And then he has somebody come on, Bitcoin Mechanic, who says it's a scam and it's really bad. And he says, yeah, no, we should be conservative about the block size. We should just, ban these things, or at least change them or figure out some solutions. And then he has Casey Rodimer on and he says, oh, actually, this guy was pretty cool. I think ordinals are kind of fine now. And he just ping pongs back and forth to it. And his excuse every time is, well, people learn and they change their mind, which is true. People always can change their mind. But if you're changing your mind, based on the last person you talk to every 5 minutes, that's not, updating your opinion based on new information. That's just being a rube that is led along by whatever the latest narrative is. And that's exactly what is being fed by this girl here, Roger Ver, man bad, block size increase, destroys decentralization. It's all over, because you can't have any thought crime or any questions about, well, why don't we just raise the block size? Because like Vitalik asking the wizards in the intro to this show, as soon as you start going down that line of, start pulling on that thread, that starts to get you to the root of the disease, because you have to go back and reevaluate the history and what are the Bitcoin cashes doing and what were they saying then and what are they saying now and what are we doing wrong and why is it not working, and on and on and on and on and on. I think this case is just becoming unstoppable. If these guys can listen to this 30 minutes and not have at least a twinge of like, what the fuck are we doing, I will be amazed. Any thoughts on that, Peter McCormack?
I mean, it doesn't surprise me at all. Like, I think I've kind of, like, before the show, I never paid attention to Peter. Like, we started bringing him up in a couple clips and whatnot. So I've maybe watched 2 episodes of his podcast. I think I'm still in their Telegram group. But I think at this point I've like written him off as just a grifter. Like I don't. As soon as the next shiny thing comes along that will make him money, he's on that. Like I don't. And so all of the social like what is it, like virtue signaling, I guess, or like pandering, is just positioning himself to make sure he still has a job in the future, which is disappointing. I mean, I get why, but come on.
Well, I mean, it's like they say, it's very hard to tell a man, whatever it is, it's very hard to convince a man he's wrong about what his salary depends on, or whatever that saying is, right? It's like it's paying his bills, shilling all this BTC nonsense and just going in circles, and he's traveling around the world meeting cool people with his mates, having a good life. Of course, he's not going to listen to anything that doesn't just become the thing in vogue that he has to address. And he won't, and his sponsors don't want to hear it. The power brokers at Blockstream and Bitcoin Core don't want to hear it. And he could easily just leverage the same accusation against me and just say, well, you're running Flipside for the BCH podcast. Why are you any different? You're just shilling BCH because that's your thing, But the difference is that, I arrived at my conclusion with facts and evidence as outlined, laboriously, whereas you just go wherever the money is, So Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, it's in the white paper. Like, God, okay. All right, so let's have a look now. We've just
closing it up with just the God, yeah, that was perfect. That's a fantastic little cherry on top.
All right, we got one more little thing here we got to look at then here, which is the Bankless guys. So you might say to me, okay, Jeremy, there's this huge regime. BTC is all a scam, and they're busy trying to shut out and suppress information about BCH, and we can't accept all these scams and lies and stuff like that. We're not the only people in the world. Why isn't BCH getting traction elsewhere? And that's a very good question. So let's have a look at how BCH is being covered outside of the sort of BTC maxi laser eye bubbles. And we've got the Bankless guys, the Ethereum top shillers, talking to Robin Linus, who is the creator of BitVM. And in this grand topic, they had a little hit on BCH. So let's hear that.
Asking others, or like without finding consensus among the entire community.
It's a good explanation, good way to like kind of delineate the camps. There's those that believe that Bitcoin should just be an asset, or like that's kind of what they're most interested in. Those that believe it should be an asset and a currency. I think you fall into that camp. There was another camp that felt that way too back in 2017, and they forked off and they did the Bitcoin Cash type thing. It was a departure in terms of how they thought about Bitcoin, the asset, but also their philosophy for how to actually scale this. And I'm guessing you're not sort of in the big block philosophy, because you've stayed with Bitcoin and you're trying to scale the network as is with these 4 megabyte blocks, and do it via ZK proofs. But talk about that. Why didn't you go fork off and join the Bitcoin Cash crew, who is also talking about like Bitcoin should be a currency, a means of payment, and not just an asset? Why have you stayed with Bitcoin up until this point in time?
Well, I think there's only one Bitcoin, and I'm not that set on the block size as it is right now. I would be open to discuss block size increases. I totally see the counter arguments. I totally think that most people should be able to run full nodes and sync within a reasonable amount of time. And I think that is a very fundamental property of Bitcoin, and we should not relax that. We should not harm that. But on the other hand, computers are improving a lot. Internet connectivity is improving drastically. And over time, we can definitely increase the block size safely, I think. If we can do it right now, or if we should do it in a couple of years, that's open for debate. But in general, I don't think it's like a bad idea in general. I think it is definitely worth talking about that. And even back then, people like Adam Beck said that it makes sense to like double the block size in, I don't know, 5-year intervals or something like that. And I think there is kind of like a trauma in the Bitcoin community because of that block size wars. That it became like kind of a stigma to even talk about it and to mention it at all. And I kind of understand where this is coming from, but I feel like the new generation of Bitcoin developers, like me or like the people that I hang out with, they are way more open to these ideas, and I think it would be fine to increase the block size over time.
I'd like to hop back into the BitVM conversation. You when you were explaining it in your background and the progress that you've made so far, there was a eureka moment.
So there you have it. And so what's happening outside the BTC controlled conversation? Well, firstly, acknowledgement at, wait a second, why are we here back at these same narratives? BCH needs to be a medium of exchange. What about doing additional assets on BCH, like on Bitcoin? Like the BCH community has just been front running because we've been in the real world exactly what the BTC community is just slowly catching up to. And it's taking them fucking forever, but they're slowly getting there and just dribs and drabs. And this guy is here and he can acknowledge when he's in a different sphere of things. There's a taboo and all that. I mean, we've heard about that on what Bitcoin did and so forth, right? But he can at least speak a bit more frankly about it. But even he just still is propagating these same like lies and mistruths about like Adam Back saying, well, we could raise the block size in 5 years, which he probably did, but that was 7 years ago. And where's Adam Back coming out? Okay, guys, the 5 years has come up. Let's do a block size increase. No, he's not doing that. That was all just gaslighting, just like these Democratic political operatives, the exact same thing, to just pick some point in the distant future where there's not really going to be accountability and just stall everything down to a grinding halt, sand in the gears, just like Stefan Molyneux talked about in 2014. And then just by the time that comes around, you just spin a new narrative and just kick the can down the road further and further and further and just delay everything with this endless bureaucracy like you were talking about, right? So even this guy can't get to the bottom of what's actually going on or how to make any forward progress. And the Bankless host can't either. You saw when he said there's only one Bitcoin, you saw David he just nods. He's like, yeah, no, that's true. He's bought into all that. These guys have never had, as far as I can tell, I might be wrong, they've done hundreds of episodes, but as far as I can tell, they've never had somebody on to argue for BCH. They've had all kinds of people talk about and bring up BCH and talk about the block size war and all of that. But I don't think they've ever had anybody genuinely come on the show who was a sort of BCH maximalist like myself or like Emergent Reasons or somebody like that who could make the case for BCH from the history, all correct, and hear what they have to say. You know, I have poked them on Twitter a little bit. You know, I've wrecked David in a couple of threads to try and get his attention, and be the same thing I did with Eric Wall and be like, listen, I've got something important to say here. You know, let me just kick your ass on something that you think you're an expert in so that you realize maybe this is somebody I should look into a little bit more. But he just gets saltier and he just brushes it off and he doesn't want to look into it at all. So even though these guys on any other topic would say, well, let's hear both sides, obviously this is uniquely the one thing that they will not have a BCH related guest on. They're welcome to prove me wrong. I would love that if they got somebody to actually talk it through, but they just still have their narrative of the big blockers of the shitcoiners who had these stupid ideas and whatever, and they can't just self-reflect and think, why is it that we just keep coming back to BCH and this 2017 and the block size wars over and over and over again? It's 2024. Why haven't things moved on? Why is this same point in Bitcoin history perennially relevant and something we're always asking our guests about? And why would we not hear the other fucking side of the story just once? Not once. So just calling you out there. Ryan actually seems like a pretty cool guy, but David, genuinely, I'm a bit like, mate, what is going wrong with you? He just has this arrogant, dismissal of the BCH community. And any time I'm talking to him about it, he's exactly like a laser eye, even though he should be able to be somewhat objective. He swallowed all the Kool-Aid because he just came into crypto in 2017 or whatever, once the censorship was already in full force, and he's never, ever gone back and done the work to at least hear the other side of the story. He wouldn't have to agree with it, obviously, but to actually understand where the BCH community is coming from. Like, how could you ever get the truth about anything? Like, how could you ever get the truth about Russia if you never asked any Russian about it ever? You only asked Americans and, Europeans and Africans. Like, why wouldn't you just once ask a fucking Russian what is going on in Russia, or what their history of their country is, or what's going on, And like, it's just unbelievable to me that these journalists. So this just goes to show that the problem is most acute in the BTC community, but BCH suffers this from every side. The propaganda and censorship was so widespread and so convincing and so impactful on everyone that even people who should be neutral are still essentially not even neutral. They're still fighting against, BCH and finding ways to dismiss and suppress it. And you just get these tiny little threads of BCH in their stuff, and never let's actually find someone who knows what they're talking about and get to the real root of the problem. So they become, by extension, part of the sort of gaslighting and propaganda and everything from the ground up. What's your take on this?
So is David the top right guy? Okay.
Yeah, David's on the right. Ryan's on the left.
Okay, and who's on the bottom here?
The bottom is the guest, Robin Linus, the BitVM guy.
Oh, okay. Okay. So my question was going to be, do you think like him saying that he would be willing to talk about a block size increase kind of mark the point where they might start talking about Bitcoin Cash? But if it's just a guess, I doubt that'll be the case. Well, interesting. I did notice, I was watching the top left guys like reactions as the fellow on the bottom was speaking, and it seemed like as soon as he mentioned that there was trauma and that he was willing to talk about it, or like that he'd be open to it, there's some squintiness, like there's some, like without even saying a word, you could see the skepticism and like kind of the like just below the surface triggering kind of happening. And I've never watched any like full podcast by these guys, but I wonder, is it that trauma coming out that like is causing the squinty skepticism, dismissal, or is it some other
but that's the thing. Like, I mean, these guys have done great work. Don't get me wrong. I've listened to quite a lot of Bankless, and they're a really important voice in the crypto scene and something like that. But they truly justify being called out on this because, like you say, they've just had so many guests who've all talked shit about BCH or dismissed it, or like this guy here, they're BTC holders, and I guess they either came in post the fork or they immediately dumped or whatever. They've never heard the other side of the story. Don't really remember them talking about hijacking Bitcoin, but maybe that was on an episode I didn't catch. They've got a lot of stuff, but I feel like it would have come up on my radar probably if they'd been talking about hijacking Bitcoin seriously. And they just have bought the Kool-Aid. By extension, they're smart enough to know all the problems in BTC because they can see it from an ETH perspective. Okay, the fees aren't working and the blah, blah, blah. But even though they're objectively removed in that sense, they still come up with the same like garbage when it comes to BCH, just finding ways to dismiss it. And BTC is the one true Bitcoin. And, the big blockers were idiots that were wrong and they just went off on their own and they're irrelevant. And I mean, to his credit, Ryan does ask, why don't you go join up with them? Like, but yeah, they've just had segments on the show before as well too. I think they had one with Nick Carter a while ago. I think we did a segment about it on this show where Ryan and Nick and David were talking about, and the big blockers, and they thought this and they thought that. And it was like, why wouldn't you just fucking ask one what they thought? Why do you have this whole narrative of how everything went from the big block side when you've never even, I don't know. I can't handle any more of this. David, you're an asshole. I've called you out enough times. Fucking listen to what I have to say. Listen to this whole 40 minutes and tell me I'm wrong after that. Okay. Next one, and to kind of wrap it up, put a bow on it all, we've got meme of the week. This poor sap in El Salvador, where Bitcoin is not working king, and where BTC City, which was promised 3 years ago, is not being delivered. There's some text that pops up during this video. So for the audio listeners, actually, Jet, can you narrate this one? I've been doing a lot of talking. Just read out the sort of titles that come up as the clip plays, yeah?
Bitcoin City, my bad.
Well, it's going to be right there in the Fonsecan Gulf, and it's going to include everything: residential areas, commercial areas, services, museums, entertainment.
When crypto enthusiast Corbin Keegan heard El Salvador was planning to build a Bitcoin city, he packed up his life in Chicago and headed for
Conchagua.
the site of the planned development. More than 2 years later, he's still waiting for the first brick to be laid.
So I'm the first resident of this Bitcoin city in Conchagua here that we are. I think I'm the only white immigrant or new Salvadorian or Bitcoin city resident.
In 2021, El Salvador became the first country to adopt Bitcoin as legal tender. President Nayib Bukele billed Bitcoin City as a futuristic metropolis, where Bitcoin mining would be powered by geothermal energy of a nearby volcano, and residents would pay no income tax.
I told people one day a nation state will adopt Bitcoin, and they thought I was crazy. And then here it was. I never even heard of El Salvador, but I learned about the new Bitcoin president and his plans to not only adopt Bitcoin but develop a Bitcoin city.
El Salvador's crypto experiment has been widely seen as a failure. Okay. Oh. There's a little sign Bitcoin City will be built anytime soon.
That's it. So this is just meme of the week. The Lightning Network will be ready in 18 months and Bitcoin City will be ready in just 2 more years. And this poor sap here who's just been gaslit with all the lies about BTC and about Nayib Bukele, and he was going to make this grand futuristic city and all that. It was just to create hype for the BTC community and pump the price. And he has been lied to, and he's wasted 2 years of his life sitting on this beach wondering when is it going to happen. And he finally woke up that it wasn't, and he'd been gaslit and lied to. And that's just the perfect encapsulation of everything that I've just talked about in a slightly more humorous way, right?
And slightly less painful. Like, it's 2 years.
Hey, it's a beach holiday.
yeah. It's only been 2 years on a beach holiday. We've been doing 7 years of, guys, what the fuck is going on here?
Yeah. I feel like there's not that much more to say. So let's just get on. Message to the community. Okay, so for the BCH community, I think a lot of you guys already know this, and you've already seen this. You've already followed it all on this show. This is not news to any of you, but I'm hoping that this adds some more context and clarity to it. And of course, you can go look into the US election stuff if you're not familiar with that, because these same patterns just repeat and repeat in human nature in all kinds of scales and sizes and different arenas. It's the same thing, propaganda and gaslighting. So just we need to be aware of that, because we can't let that creep into the BCH community. And we've been doing a good job of not doing that. So that's that part's sorted. For everyone else, I'm going to tag all those people who we've called out and wrecked in this show. I already said it in that section where I listed off like my credibility to be making these claims. The logic stands on its own, and there is no way to dismiss me as just some ignorant hater who doesn't know what they're talking about. So watch it very seriously, then look in the mirror and think, how long am I going to keep lying to myself? It's really that simple. Do it or don't, the consequences will be on you, not me. But if you want to come talk about it, I'm open to it from any of you. Okay.